Full frame versus crop sensor cameras. It is a tale as old as time. Some people swear by their full frame cameras and others say that they're not worth the extra money that you have to pay for them, as well as the full frame lenses on top of that. Honestly, if money is an issue for you, just go ahead and get the super nice stuff. But I found that ultimately the decision can come to this one major factor. So if you're on the fence about making this decision and you don't want to make a really expensive purchase that you're going to regret later, which you could go wrong theoretically buying either one of these, this is the video for you. Let's get into it. Now, in this comparison, we're going to be using the Sony FX3 and the Sony FX30, basically the same exact camera, with the big difference being that the FX30 is an APS-C and the FX3 is full frame. Can you really think of a better example for this comparison? Now, we're really going to break this down and we're really going to get into it, but I believe that ultimately the decision can come down to if you're going to have control over your surroundings. So things like your lighting, your spacing, how far or close you can get to your subject, things like that. But stay with me here because we're really about to get into this. Now, of course, there are other factors that we could talk about. We could talk about depth of field. We could talk about the price and, variety of full frame versus APS-C lenses, all those things. But those ultimately come down to a matter of personal preference. But what we're getting into right here is the fact that this full frame or APS-C camera can make or break it for me. So control over your environments. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is spacing. So I'm going to talk about my experience and how it's worked or not worked for me. And so you take it into yours and think about what you're going to be shooting. Think about what areas you're going to be working in and compare and contrast it to yourself. So let's say a couple years ago, I first got the FX30, right? And I'm thinking, you know what? Crop sensor camera, but it's got 4K, 10-bit, up to 120 frames per second. It's got the internal fan. This is going to hold it down for me for sports, right? And while the FX30 really is an amazing camera, there is a limited amount of space when it comes to the sidelines of a football field or courtside at a basketball game. And so I noticed when they're on the other side, it's great. I get the extra reach. I can follow along with everything. But as soon as they start coming my way, now the camera's really too punched in and it's really hard to, keep up with the action as well as just fit everything into my screen, especially when shooting at 120 frames per second in 4K, because there is an additional 1.6 on top of the already 1.5 times crop. And so I'm just way too punched in, especially considering, vertical video is king right now. And you want to be able to fit that entire shot into an Instagram reel. Now swap over to my FX3, which is full frame. I have absolutely no problem with that. I can fit everything in the frame, especially when I'm using lenses like my 35 to 150. I can get 50-yard line all the way up to the touchdown to have enough room for everything, and even when I'm shooting in 120 frames per second. So for you, think about the workspace that you're going to be in. Are you going to have a lot of room to be flexible? If you're shooting a YouTube video like this, you can just move your camera back. Are you going to be working in a studio where you can tell your subject like, hey, take a couple steps back here? Are you going to be able to just move your camera a little bit? Are you going to have that room and that flexibility with a crop sensor camera? Are you going to be in situations to where you're going to need to be able to capture that entire thing without having that extra punch? So things to consider. Before we get to this next part, I want to say if you have found any value in this video so far, please like and subscribe for me. It goes a long way. That's all I gotta say on that. Back to the video. Another thing you're gonna have to consider when it comes to this whole control over your environment thing is the lighting that you're gonna be dealing with. So full frame and APS-C, that full frame bigger sensor is gonna allow in a lot more light into your camera, which is gonna allow better performance out of the same lenses in low light. And the APS-C is going to have a lot more noise. So once again, explaining my experiences, you compare and contrast how it's going to be for you. So for me, we're going to go back to just the FX30 days. Football is outside, so we're at the mercy of the sun and the stadium lights. Basketball, it's whatever the lighting of the arena has to offer. And even in NBA stadiums, for things like player intros and special moments, they purposely turn down the lights for dramatic effect. And so especially if you're going to be shooting at your camera's base ISOs for log footage, then you have to do a lot more work to keep your camera at its preferred settings. So super quick rundown if you aren't familiar with what base ISOs or even what log footage is. Log is a very flat profile that really allows you to get a whole lot more out of your color grading. Better highlights, better shadows, more out your colors, things like that. But what base ISOs are is basically your camera has two ISOs that perform the absolute best when it comes to equality between your dynamic range and the low noise in your camera. And so comparing the FX3 and the FX30, FX30, the FX30 has a dual base ISO of 800 and 2500. And then the FX3 has a base ISO of 800 and 12,800. And so that's a huge difference, 10,000 right there. And so when it comes to that, I remember being on my FX30, I'd be in a game outside and the sun goes down. And then once that happens, I'm shooting at my high base ISO of 2500. And with that, I still don't have enough light to properly expose my image. So then I'm ending up with a darker image in log and a whole bunch more noise than I'd want. Versus on the full frame Sony FX3, now my higher ISO is honestly too much. I have to use the ND filter to turn it down some. And then once again, I got to bring in that 4K 120 frames per second on the crop sensor camera, and that also introduces even more noise. So once again, for you, think about what kind of situations are you going to be? Are you going to be in a studio to where you can set up lights wherever you need to? Are you going to be recording YouTube videos where you can just kind of, you know, get brighter lights and spend a lot less money on getting more lighting for your situation to where like that's not going to be a problem for you and your camera? It ultimately comes down to what you're going to be working with. But bottom line, if you've got the money for full frame, if you got the money for G Masters, all that, go for it. I'm not here trying to convince anybody who has the money to steer clear of it. But if you're on the fence, if you're on a budget, you know, if you get something like the FX30 and you're gonna have control over your lighting, space, things like that, like you can really make it work because they're very, very much capable cameras. But if you're not, and if you're gonna be in a situation like I am, it really might just make sense to, you know, make that investment or to wait and save up a little longer to get that full frame camera. So hope this video helped. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, anything that you think is really important that I should have missed or that I got wrong, you know, feel free to leave that in the comments. We're a community here. But if you do think that the crop sensor realm is something that you could go for, I actually have a little review on the FX30 that you can check out right here. Aside from that, like, comment, subscribe, all that, and I'll holla at you.